There exists a solution you can prepare at home for under $2 that revitalizes weathered, sun-damaged wood, restoring it to its original, factory-fresh appearance. This is not achieved through concealing paint or a tint that fades within 6 months. It deeply penetrates the grain, rebuilding the wood from the inside out. A single application on a decaying fence will leave neighbors believing you've replaced every plank. One pass over a worn deck will cause the contractor you almost hired to lose a job worth nearly $1,030. Furniture that seemed destined for the landfill can be transformed into showroom-quality pieces. No sanding, no power tools, and no prior experience required. This remarkable formula predates the Second World War, known intimately by artisans of the 1930s. Cabinet makers passed it down like a cherished family secret. Then, the wood restoration industry unearthed a devastating truth. If homeowners discovered this liquid, they would cease hiring contractors. A bottle costing less than $2, capable of replacing a service valued at nearly $930, could not be allowed to circulate freely. Consequently, it was suppressed, not due to failure, but because it was far too effective. This is the chronicle of the concoction the wood industry never wanted you to find. Welcome to Forbidden Roots. If these stories resonate with you, please subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here, we unearth what the industry sought to erase. Now, allow me to transport you back to the very birthplace of this formula. In the year 1860, a British inventor named Frederick Walton observed something peculiar in his London workshop. A film had formed atop a can of linseed oil he had left open overnight. This gelatinous layer was more durable than many varnishes and more pliable than lacquer. Walton deduced that the oil was reacting with atmospheric oxygen, creating a natural polymer. He spent the ensuing 3 years refining the process at a factory on the outskirts of London. By 1863, he had invented linoleum, the first mass-produced flooring material in history, built almost entirely upon a primary ingredient, linseed oil, extracted from the seeds of the flax plant. However, the story of this oil extends far beyond Victorian England, reaching back much, much further. Flax is one of Earth's most ancient crops, cultivated in ancient Mesopotamia for its fiber and seeds. Linen fabrics, remarkably intact after 4,000 years, have been discovered within Egyptian tombs. In ancient China, woodworkers found that pressing flax seeds yielded a golden oil that saturated wood, hardening over weeks to form a protective barrier. This marked one of the earliest documented wood finishes in human history, not factory-produced polyurethane, nor laboratory-synthesized chemical sealants, but oil pressed from a seed and rubbed onto wood with a cloth. For centuries across Europe, cabinet makers, shipwrights, and furniture artisans relied on linseed oil as the cornerstone of their craft. Medieval builders mixed it with drying compounds to create a boiled version, which hardened more rapidly and offered greater durability than raw oil. German cathedral doors treated with this oil in the 15th century stand to this day. British vessels coated their decks with linseed oil before crossing the Atlantic, enabling the wood to withstand salt water, tropical sun, and years of harsh conditions. Then, a pivotal event occurred. In the 1950s, the petrochemical industry introduced synthetic alkyd resins. Polyurethane, lacquers, and chemical varnishes flooded the market. These products were quicker to apply, offered a brighter sheen, and were significantly more cost-effective to manufacture. Linseed oil cost mere cents per gallon, while synthetic finishes commanded dollars and required reapplication every 2 to 3 years. The industry didn't shift because the new products were superior. It shifted because they generated recurring revenue. The age-old formula began to silently disappear from hardware store shelves. Now, before we proceed, Let's examine the molecular process that occurs when you apply this liquid to damaged wood. Linseed oil is a triglyceride with an unusually high concentration of alpha-linolenic acid, a polyunsaturated fatty acid that reacts with oxygen through a process scientists term oxidation. When you rub the oil into wood, it doesn't merely sit on the surface like paint or varnish. It penetrates deeply into the cellular structure of the wood itself. Once inside, the fatty acid chains begin to cross-link with one another, forming a flexible polymer network that fills every pore. This cross-linking creates a new material within the fibers, a natural resin that expands and contracts with temperature fluctuations, but repels moisture and resists scratches. The difference compared to polyurethane is substantial. Polyurethane typically remains atop the grain like a plastic shell. A single crack in this shell is all it takes for moisture to seep underneath, causing the film to peel, blister, and break. This is why so many decks treated with synthetic finishes end up peeling and turning grey after just a few seasons. Linseed oil does the opposite because it becomes an integral part of the wood itself. Now, introduce white vinegar into the mix, and something remarkable happens. Vinegar is acetic acid, a natural solvent that cuts through decades of dirt, oxidation, and dead finish without harming the healthy fibers beneath. As the vinegar strips away the grey layer, linseed oil floods the newly exposed grain and begins to polymerize immediately. The surface ceases to be a dry crust and reverts to behaving like living wood. The third ingredient is the key that unlocks the entire formula: turpentine. A natural solvent distilled from pine resin, turpentine thins the linseed oil, allowing it to penetrate much deeper and cure far more rapidly. Without turpentine, the oil can pool on the surface and take weeks to harden. With turpentine, it absorbs in minutes and begins to harden within hours. This is the difference between a mixture that feels sticky and one that truly works within the fibers. The total cost of these 3 ingredients, amortized per application, is less than $2. A small container of boiled linseed oil typically costs around $4. A gallon of white vinegar is usually under $3, and a small can of turpentine is about $5 and can last for months. Now, compare this to the charges of a contractor for a comparable outcome. Restoring a deck of approximately 18 square meters can cost close to $1,010. Labor alone often ranges between $620 and $1,450 for a job that takes 1 to 3 days. Refurbishing a single piece of antique furniture in a workshop can range from $310 to $820. And what is the chemical basis many professionals use? Products derived from the same oil-based principle that has existed for over a century. The margin isn't always in skill. The margin is frequently in your ignorance of its existence. If you've made it this far, you now know more about basic wood restoration than the vast majority of homeowners. Subscribe and share this with someone about to waste nearly $1,030 on a contractor. Now, stay with me, because what follows is the part they truly don't want you to hear. This formula isn't readily available in every hardware store across America as a go-to solution. Why do so many contractors act as if it doesn't exist? Because the wood restoration industry generates nearly $2 billion annually from product sales alone. The broader home restoration market in the United States reached $210 billion in annual revenue. $210 billion. That's the magnitude of the machine that profits from your ignorance of 3 ingredients you can purchase with pocket change. Deck refurbishment alone costs many homeowners between $930 and $2,780 per project, and the industry recommends repeating it every 2 to 3 years. That translates to nearly $1,030 every 3 years for a single deck. Over 20 years of home ownership, that approaches $7,200 spent on just one wooden platform behind your house, a platform you could maintain yourself for under $10 in total, using a formula predating the invention of television. Now, multiply that by the 75 million single-family homes in the United States that have decks, fences, porches, pergolas, furniture, flooring, cabinets, trim, window frames, and wooden doors. The sheer volume of money flowing from homeowners to contractors and chemical companies for basic wood maintenance is staggering. And it all hinges on one thing: keeping you convinced that you cannot do it yourself. Here is the mechanism that keeps this knowledge buried. You cannot patent linseed oil because it is a natural product that has existed for millennia. You cannot patent vinegar because acetic acid is one of the oldest substances known to humanity. You cannot patent turpentine because it has been distilled from pine since the time of the ancient Greeks. There is no exclusive molecule, no industrial secret, no actual intellectual property to protect. And what cannot be patented does not generate licensing fees. What does not generate licensing fees does not create exclusive distribution. What is not exclusively distributed does not build brand monopolies. The entire business model of wood restoration relies on you believing that wood care requires expensive, specialized, name-brand products. Products with names you see in television commercials. Products that contain the same active ingredients costing pennies at the hardware store, repackaged with a label and a colossal markup. The wood restoration product market alone was valued at $1.9 trillion in 2024, dominated by corporations like 3M, Sherwin-Williams, and Howard Products. Their message is simple and effective. Don't try it yourself. Trust the professionals. Buy our brand. Yet, the active ingredient in most oil-based wood restoration products remains the same drying oil chemistry that Frederick Walton understood in 1860. They are selling you linseed oil with additives and a logo, charging you 10 to 50 times the cost of the raw material. That is not innovation. It's a business model built on the premise that you will never open a chemistry textbook. Consider what happens when a homeowner searches online for how to restore aged wood. The first page of results is typically dominated by paid advertisements from restoration brands and sponsored articles from home improvement companies. The algorithm itself is shaped by advertising dollars, pushing the $2 solution further down the page. Meanwhile, on home renovation television shows, the host almost invariably recommends the latest name-brand wood treatment. They never mention that the active chemistry in that $28 bottle costs less than $1 to replicate with 3 ingredients from the paint aisle. The suppression doesn't require a Hollywood-style conspiracy in a dimly lit room. It is simply the invisible hand of a market that rewards complexity and punishes simplicity. When a solution is cheap, easy, and unpatentable, virtually no company has an incentive to promote it. Thus, it vanishes from public consciousness, generation by generation. And the cycle repeats because every year, a new homeowner looks at a grey deck and types into a search engine, "How much does it cost to restore a deck?" And the answer they receive is always a figure. Never a recipe with 3 ingredients. But I must be honest with you, this formula is not magic, and there are limitations you must understand. Raw linseed oil without drying agents can take weeks to fully cure in humid environments. This is why the recipe specifically calls for boiled linseed oil, which contains dryers that accelerate hardening to 24 to 48 hours. Linseed oil can also yellow slightly over time, particularly on very light woods like maple or birch. However, on darker woods such as oak, walnut, cedar, and redwood, that warm hue beautifully enhances the grain. And here comes a safety warning that far too many DIY channels overlook. Rags soaked with linseed oil can heat up and ignite through spontaneous combustion if left crumpled in a pile. This is not a minor detail. It is a serious safety rule. You must always spread these rags outdoors to dry completely or submerge them in water within a sealed metal container before disposal. Never leave them lying around inside a room, workshop, or garage. This part is not optional. Now, here is how to prepare and apply this mixture. Step 1. Gather the 3 ingredients from any hardware or paint store. 1 part boiled linseed oil, the can must state boiled on the label. 1 part distilled white vinegar, and 1 part turpentine, also known as spirits of turpentine. Step 2. Combine equal parts of the 3 ingredients in a glass jar with an airtight lid. Shake vigorously for about 30 seconds until a cloudy, golden-hued liquid forms. Step 3. Clean the wood surface with a dry brush to remove dust, cobwebs, and loose debris. You do not need to sand initially. You do not need to strip. You do not need a pressure washer for a first test. Step 4. Dip a clean cotton cloth into the mixture and apply it, following the grain, with firm, even strokes, working in sections about 60 centimeters wide so the liquid does not accumulate before you spread it. Step 5. Allow the first coat to absorb for 10 to 15 minutes, then wipe away any excess with a dry rag. Step 6. Wait 24 hours and apply a second coat in the same manner. This second application deepens the color and reinforces the protective barrier within the fibers. If you are testing it on an aged deck, begin with the most damaged plank. This will allow you to see the change immediately. The grey layer will begin to lift as the oil penetrates the exposed grain. The before and after on a single board can convince you faster than any discourse. Within minutes, you will want to proceed with the rest because the transformation is undeniable. For indoor furniture, use a softer cloth, less pressure, and small controlled movements. Antique pieces often respond exceptionally well because the oil restores moisture and flexibility to wood that has been drying for decades. Tables, consoles, dressers, and chests can regain their vitality with a single, well-executed application. For fences or large surfaces, you can use a wide brush or a roller to cover more quickly. A fence that appeared ready for replacement can change its appearance dramatically in a single afternoon. A batch prepared in a medium-sized jar covers approximately 2.8 to 3.7 square meters of surface area, depending on the wood's condition. For wooden floors, apply thin, even coats with a flat mop or wide cloth, always in sections, allowing sufficient time between coats. The finish typically develops a warm, satin sheen that deepens with each application. This is a maintenance logic that generations of antique homeowners use to preserve oak and walnut floors. Now compare this to the cost of professional service. A contractor might charge you over $620 for similar coverage on a single deck. A floor restoration company might quote between $33 and $77 per square meter, turning a 24 square meter room into a bill of nearly $1,450. You could perform an initial test for less than $2 in materials and with mere minutes of work. No appointments, no weeks of waiting, and no filling your home with strangers or unnecessary dust. Furthermore, the finish can be maintained with light periodic maintenance coats because the oil doesn't live as a surface crust on the verge of peeling. It lives within the wood and can be renewed. An annual maintenance coat takes minutes per piece and keeps the grain hydrated and protected for decades. Compare that to the contractor who wants to see you every 2 to 3 years, charging nearly $1,030 per visit. This knowledge didn't vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because it was too useful, too accessible, and too difficult to monetize for certain industries. For thousands of years, humanity protected wood with seed oils and simple compounds. No corporations, no brands, no expensive machinery, just basic chemistry and practical observation. Your grandparents might not have used it in precisely the same way, but someone in your family likely knew a version of this idea. It was handwritten on cards, kept in drawers, mixed in glass jars in workshops, yards, and garages. Then, one generation stopped passing it down because advertising told them there was a better solution. It wasn't always a better solution. Often, it was just a more expensive one. Contractors know formulas like this. Manufacturers do too. The $2 trillion wood restoration industry prays every day that you never learn what you've just heard, but now you know. And it's not difficult to remember. 3 ingredients, equal parts, 1 jar, 1 cloth, and 20 minutes. That grey deck you've been avoiding for months could look much better this very weekend. That fence that everyone tells you to replace might still have life. That antique table you inherited, looking tired today, could shine again. All for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. The wood wasn't dead. It was just waiting for someone to remember what the industry made us forget. If this archive has provided you with value, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. Every time you share, you help preserve knowledge that many have tried to erase. And every like tells the algorithm that this information matters more than another ad for an expensive product with a shiny label. The next Forbidden Roots vault opens very soon, and what's coming weighs even more than what you've just heard.